Education is key to everything. It shapes every human being. This is fundamentally important for the future of any nation. People who, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, had a great influence on the educational system of the former republics, have understood it rather well. For example, in the Ukraine, during the last 25 years, many school textbooks have been written by George Soros's NGOs and published by them in Canada. The result is quite serious and irreversible. In Russia, over the past quarter of a century, the general level of education and literacy has fallen from one of the highest in the world to an all-time low. And key factor here was the accelerated destruction of the Soviet education system without any meaningful replacement. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, many new concepts have been imported into Russia. Some of them had shown good results, but many had a truly catastrophic consequences. One of the dramatic examples is the reform of the education system. Large influence on the new educational curriculum had NGOs related to George Soros. No surprise that there have been numerous attempts to smuggle so-called sexuality lessons. In the turbulent 1990s, many brave new experiments had started in Russia.
After perestroika, the first education reform that faced parents and the children were prolongation of the school for 1 year. We had 10 years of school before reform, now we have 11 years. Why it was done? Based on what kind of research, nobody knows. Then most of the textbooks have been replaced. Especially what is strange is the replacement of math textbooks because Russian, Soviet children, they've been performing very buoyantly in a good way on international competitions. Then the system of tests was imported as a basic assessment tool for the education, the system which proved its ineffectiveness in the United States. And now what we're having is enlargement of the schools. Several schools are united in one, so up to 1,000 of kids, and director, he doesn't know the kids, but he doesn't even know all their teachers working in this school.
Huge schools, endless tests, primitive textbooks, training up to 18 years of age. This resembles the American public school model. So current Russian educational system was imported from the United States. And what do we know about the educational system of secondary public education in America? Firstly, it is known for its huge budget, the largest in the world for those purposes, and the second largest in the country after the military budget. With just as shockingly low results, America is ranked only number 28 among the developed countries according to its general level of literacy. So why this failing system have been duplicated in Russia? The question remains unanswered.
There was something dramatically changed about American public schools. They were no longer concerned about making sure that every child had an opportunity to learn. It was social engineering and other grand schemes of the centralized planners in Washington, D.C. and the teachers' union. And they stopped caring whether or not children could read well, stopped caring about the values and morals of the public schools that had made them really a great place when I was going to school in the 50s and 60s.
Communist ideology was the main problem in the Soviet education system. In all other aspects, it had been providing quite a decent level of knowledge. Let us recall the achievements of Soviet students in international competitions. Why was it completely destroyed? Nobody knows. The fundamental role of education have been recognized very well by American elites. 100 years ago, the Rockefeller, Ford, and J.P. Morgan foundations have launched a long-range program for the transformation of mass schooling in America and around the world into a well-oiled machine for the production of standardized minds, programmed for the mass production and consumption.
When one looks at the history of public education, of state education in the United States, it's quite clear, even from the very beginning. This is going back 180 years to Massachusetts in the 1830s and 1840s. It was very clear that part of the plan, a central part of the plan, was to break the control of parents over their children, was to turn children into vehicles of central control and central manipulation. It was modest at the time, under Horace Mann and so on. There was still sort of a residual Christianity there, not a strong one, but a residual one. But over time, even that disappeared.
Ready-made solutions and desired worldview was to be put into the heads of the masses through the television and pop culture. State-of-the-art social engineering, mind manipulation technologies and large-scale state propaganda have been applied, as well as the experience of the Prussian system of mass indoctrination and discipline drills. Over 4,000 years of social stratification experience of the Indian caste system have also been used, where a good education was provided only to the highest caste of clergy, called Brahmins, and partly to the warrior caste of Kshatriya, while merchant caste of Vaishya and worker caste of Shudra were being prepared only to do the manual work and serve the higher classes. And the lowest class of the so-called untouchables was not supposed to receive any education at all.
Woodrow Wilson said that what we need in America are two classes of people. We need one class of people who has a liberal arts education and another class of people who don't have as much education, who can just do the work.
This system has been reproduced in the new conditions in the West. The elite is prepared in exclusive private schools of the Ivy League and prestigious universities, while the masses are deprived of the ability to think critically and independently through the system of compulsory public schooling.
The public schools in the United States are nothing but factories of ideological propaganda for the left. I don't know if it's planned that they want to dumb people down, but they certainly want to make them ideologically radical. And this is happening now abundantly on the question of LGBT and transgender. They are cramming these poor children's heads with pure poison. And at the same time not educating them. So it is our public school system is an utter disaster from my point of view.
With trillions of dollars spent on the system of state education, the output is exactly the one expected by those who had built this entire process.
That American education policy is very much dominated by certain foundations, and particularly the Gates Foundation. Funds almost all the research that's done on education at the lower levels, and that has created problems.
The end result is easily manageable passive mass of standard consumers never asking deep and uncomfortable questions and being unable to achieve major breakthroughs in the fields of science and culture. So importing top international talent is of paramount importance. This dumping system has been exposed by the Best Teacher of New York award winner with 35 years of experience, John Taylor Gatto. We were lucky to record an exclusive interview in his apartment in Manhattan.
The wealthy, the established power doesn't want to put up with the competition. It comes from ordinary people, and so they're retreating to ancient ways to suppress it, and they work, I'm sorry to say. You can take kids before they're 12 and ruin their minds. And Russia wasn't trapped in that consumerism during your bad years. At least you had to find other ways to realize the czar's still here. He has to put the back.
Low level of individualization is a common problem of all school systems and the main reason for the low quality of education.
We have 19 grandchildren that are being homeschooled, and we couldn't be happier with the way that it's worked. And it goes in direct contrast to what's being happening in the United States in the public school system. Throughout this period of time of the last 30-plus years, public schools have become more and more strident and less effective in trying to effectively teach children how to learn, and even the basics. Reading and math skills are not doing well in the United States as a whole.
Consolidation of schools and the introduction of standardized tests makes personalization even less attainable. All-pervasive testing system grips even the best private schools in the extremely narrow framework and makes it impossible to use different approaches to education. So a true education is replaced by endless test drills.
Tests are the very specific thing that has to be used only on specific occasions. For example, there are tests on the knowledge of the driving rules, and it's understandable, it's a good thing to use, but no one would allow a driver to go to drive on the street only based on the results of the tests. With assessment of subjects, it's the same thing. Only in the dialogue, written or oral, we can evaluate how does a person think, how does he understand the subject. Tests are just revealing gaps in the knowledge of the set of information. When children are receiving, instead of education, those lessons of standardization, it's obvious that no critical or creative thinking can be developed.
If we apply a system originally developed for the purpose of dumbing down the people, then we should not be surprised to receive the expected result. Only the best private schools, such as the St. Basil the Great Gymnasium near Moscow, manage to shift the focus into the right direction. I believe that if a person is a patriot and if a person believes in God, then we will be able to get a lot more from these children for Russia, for our future, than if we only rely on the standard testing system and their exams. Bringing up according to a value system is much more important than formal education, and it is the focus of our school. Moral upbringing is more important than formal education. Therefore, the academic block in our school is just 1 out of 4 blocks. On top of it, we have 3 other areas of focus: spiritual and moral development, labor, and sports and athletics. In many countries of the former Soviet Union, through obligatory testing system, not only a very rigid state program is imposed, but also so-called comprehensive sexuality education is introduced. Luckily, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, homeschooling became legal in Russia. Thus, centuries-old practice of Russian nobility and educated classes has been reintroduced. Almost all Russian aristocracy, until at least 12 years of age, like Pushkin or Kutuzov, and even up to university age, like Tolstoy or Borodin, have been studying at home. Obviously, this was not because schools were not available for those children. I have to say that the school is harmful to child's soul. The natural, God-created way is that the child grows up in the family and learns everything there. In Russia, this was the case for 9 centuries. Why so? Because no family has 10 or 20 children of the same age. And when children of the same age are grouped together, there appear disgusting relationships of the wolf pack, where strong suppress the weak and impudent harass the humble. At school, this is inevitable and requires a great deal of art from the teachers. Family education is not something new. In fact, it is well-forgotten old tradition. This is a form of education in which parents manage the entire educational process, deciding what, how, and when will their child study. In comparison to the 19th century, today there is no need to resort to the help of tutors because training materials and expert advices are easily available remotely online.
Home-based education is thousands of years old, and it's only really in about the last 6 or 7 generations that nations around the world have gone into institutionalized schooling. Throughout the history of the world, people have advanced and done all kinds of great inventions and learning. So the modern homeschool movement is really just, in some ways, a return to some of the best of that.
Parents all over the world are coming to the conclusion that homeschooling is probably the only real answer to the challenge of continuous deterioration of mass education. The right of the parents to give to their children the type of education that corresponds to their own religious and worldviews is the fundamental human right and should be strongly supported and protected.
We have 8 children. Sue and I, we homeschooled for most of the kids' lives. Now we have a great private Catholic school right down the street. Why did we do it? Well, the same reason a lot of Americans are moving out of the public schools. We're now at a point where I think it's dangerous to send your child to a public school. It's dangerous when it comes to their faith. It's dangerous when it comes to their morals. It's dangerous all around.
In some countries, the education system is gradually transforming into a repressive dictatorship. For example, in Germany or Sweden, parents have no right to keep their children away from the so-called comprehensive sexuality education. There have been even cases of imprisonment of such parents, and this happens in the well-established Western democracies.
That's happening everywhere. We're having teachers stand up and say, well, of course I teach kids about same-sex marriage and my same-sex marriage, and of course I teach them it's discrimination to believe otherwise. There's no thought given to the fact that parents are the primary educators of their children and the parents' rights, or little thought given. And therefore you're seeing a huge growth in homeschooling and in private schools, private Christian schools. So I think it's a new movement that is not so new. People have been homeschooling for a long time. It's actually, the home was the original place in which kids were educated.
In the United States, this form of learning is actively developing since the 1970s, and today there are more than 2.5 million home students. In the year 2000, a special university has been created for the homeschoolers. It is called the Patrick Henry College, and more than 80% of its students have been educated at home.
You can come to school here and have an incredible academic experience because the ratio of students to faculty is 10 to 1.
Oh, really?
And so the students here, there's no place to hide. And so the students get to know their professors. The professors are involved with their students, not only as scholars, but as practitioners and as mentors as well. So it's a very unique experience for our students to be able to know their professors that well and to be able to learn from them in that kind of environment. This is the Barbara Hodel Center, and it houses most of our student activity. There's a gymnasium, workout room, classroom facilities, boardrooms, a coffee shop, a general receiving area, which is this lobby here. We actually hold concerts in this atrium space because of the acoustics. Right. So we have a...
Oh, here, right?
And our bookstore. Hello, Miss Vicki.
Well, welcome.
What kind of books is this? What it is?
That's the Communist Manifesto. And
why you have it here?
We study it as part of the development of Western culture, of understanding where it comes from, and looking at history through the eyes of faith.
What is it, Solzhenitsyn?
That's exactly right. Yeah, and so that's one of the hallmarks of classical education, is that you're reading material from all different points of view.
Research clearly shows that academic results of homeschoolers are much higher than that of average public schools. Those children are really forming the cultural and intellectual elite of the country.
We opened our doors in 2000 with our first class, and now in the class of 2016, we're 16 years into operation. We have students that have graduated and are in all the most prestigious law schools and graduate schools around the country. We have 2 clerks in the Supreme Court. During the Bush years, we had more interns in the White House than any other college in America. We teach Latin and Greek. You can see some of the books that we read as part of Western culture: Dante, Milton, Homer, Shakespeare.
Here's a book that you might be interested in seeing that we carry.
Oh, Vladimir Mayakovsky.
And this one has the English and the Russian.
So this is one of the books that we read on poetry, again, that show the different developments for the way Western thought has come to be. And so we look at these, and we look at these texts critically, and we look at what are the ideas behind this that the poet was grappling with.
In recent years, the best American universities have created special ways of admittance for those homeschooled children, and they don't require certificates of formal secondary education from them. They compete for such students who possess critical and creative thinking.
And our graduates have gone on to 175 different colleges. The average acceptance rate is 100%. They apply to 3.2 schools on average. And most of them get academic scholarships to attend the university. And they have gone on to be engineers, business owners, missionaries, scientists, musicians. If you can think about it, they have probably gone on to do that and have become successful citizens wherever they're at.
When teaching at home, parents have the opportunity to appeal those teaching methods that are mostly suited to their particular child. Universal forced schooling made everyone forget that there are many different ways to give high-quality education. The most striking example is the ancient Greece, where the schools in our modern sense did not exist at all. Although ancient Greece is until now an unattainable golden standard of culture and science.
The main difference, I would say, is that it's efficient for the student, maybe more than the teacher or the system. It's really about the heart and the soul of how a person learns. And so classical education emphasizes what we call grammar, which is a lot of memory work, which sounds foreign and unnecessary to moderns. But the reality is we need to fill our brain with copious ideas and information so we have something to then think about, which is what we call the dialectic. But knowing a lot of information and being a great thinker is only part of what a good education would provide. We also need to be able to share that information with other people. And so we really focus on the skills of inputting information, processing information, and then teaching students how to share that information. Now, that sounds just like common sense, correct? But the thing is, you're looking at the person who you're working with instead of the textbook or the test or the outcomes or the goals. The thing is, it's the miracle, the wonder, the joy of all of it is that when you're looking at information and learning and sharing and discussing with a young person or somebody of any age, if you're focusing on them and what they know and how they know it and helping them with their skill sets and sharing that information, it turns out they learn about all kinds of things anyway, and they just learn how to learn. And so that is what our focus of a classical education is. It's much more than that, but that's really the heart of it.
The revival of the ancient educational traditions is the most popular trend in the family education. Parents are united in support groups to teach children outside the school system.
The important part is absolutely that we teach the parents, we walk alongside the parents, we equip the parents, we help motivate the parents, right, to educate their children, to learn to love to be with their children, to learn the tools of learning, and to ignite that love of learning throughout the whole family.
Classical education is based on the proven by 2,500 years system of the so-called trivium and quadrivium, or 7 liberal arts. Thousands of the most successful and intelligent men of antiquity, the Middle Ages, and the pre-revolutionary Russia have been brought up using this system. It is an extremely effective system that includes the Latin and Greek classical language studies, literature, composition, logic, dialectics, and rhetorics.
And the great thing about the classical model is that you can apply it to anything. It is a way to learn anything. And that way, it doesn't matter what your culture is, because you're just practicing the tools of learning with different subject matter.
Many intelligent people in the West are starting to realize that, in fact, home-educated children are actually the main hope for society. Not only because they show much higher academic results, but also because they're much more active socially. They're more successful in the development of their careers and in the construction of their family life.
Our daughter, we've only been blessed with one, but she just finished 12 years of homeschooling, and she's a freshman at Stanford University. We are homeschooling advocates, and our little town has so many homeschoolers that they are almost the size, there must be 1,000 homeschooled kids in our county, and it's one of the smallest counties in Virginia. Homeschooling is a terrific opportunity for families to continue to be responsible for their children and to respond to the natural and the divine law in terms of they have both the responsibility and the right to teach their own children and to guide their education.
A Soviet man is afraid of home education, and the Soviet people perceive school as a reality that cannot be bypassed, as if it is needed. In fact, neither Pushkin nor Lermontov have spent any time at school. For the most complete disclosure of each individual's talents, there must be a diversity of forms of education. The more diverse it is, the better. This is beneficial both to the families and to the state as a whole. Here, excessive centralization and standardization only hurts. This is supported by international ratings of freedom of education in various countries of the world. Additionally, the right of the parents to give to their children an education that is in line with their moral and ethical views and religious traditions is a fundamental right stated in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and other United Nations documents, as well as in the laws of most countries.
Following the end of World War II, when the Allies defeated Germany, the United Nations created a institution and the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, which was a response, in part, to the atrocities perpetrated by the Nazis. In Germany, homeschooling was criminalized was in 1938 during the Nazi socialist times. Of course, in 1938, all the state schools were National Socialist schools. Article 26, Part 3 of that declaration states that parents have a prior right to decide how children should be educated, and that parents have a fundamental interest in deciding how their children should be educated, and that the state must respect and protect the right of parents to make these decisions and never use education as a weapon of social policy for totalitarian reasons, which is exactly what happened in Nazi Germany and is happening today in countries like Sweden, in Germany, and in other countries, even Western countries like the United States.
In Russia, family education is enjoying legal freedom for almost 25 years, but still is in its nascent stage. Over 50,000 families are studying in such a way in Russia, but this number is constantly growing. This form of education oftentimes faces resistance of officials and directors of public schools, while the state should, on the contrary, be cherishing, appreciating, and supporting those families who are undertaking a very hard labor to educate their own children at home. Those families are the real hope of emergence of the new Russian Pushkin, Tolstoy, and Dostoevsky.